Hello, I hope you are well today. This is Linda Stacy of Living Blueprints, and today I'm going to be talking about fear in the workplace, mostly around if your boss is a fear-based, fear-driven boss, and what you might be able to do about that. So I'll give some examples and we'll go from there. So if you are watching this on Facebook or YouTube, I'd love it if you would like the video, help other people see this content. And of course, if you're on YouTube, subscribing would be awesome as well. So I've told this story before, more than a year ago, I think, when I was first thinking of doing like a podcast. And I guess this video blog is kind of like a podcast, and I might turn it into a podcast at some point. But I shared a story of early in my career, my first corporate job, similar to the one that I have now, where I did something that was good and displayed my competence, in fact, and got a really negative message from my boss at the time. And I won't use the F word. She did use the F word. And I'll also say, before I tell you what she said, which is seared into my mind, it'll never go away, it helps to know that my maiden name is Blowers, because she used that in her address to me. She called me by my last name in the context. So basically, after this thing kind of went down in a way that was not, I did not expect the thing to go down the way it did. But again, it displayed competence in a way that may have made her seem less competent. And her comment to me was, "Quit effing showing me up, Blowers, or I'll can your ASS. So anyway, that's what she said to me. "Quit effing showing me up, Blowers, or I'll can your." And you know, me, I think I was 26 or 27 at the time, and really feeling very dependent on that job and the income and all the student debt and everything else. So I didn't really know what my options were at the time. And sometimes I go back and think about, what advice would you have given to that 27-year-old version of yourself? And I still don't think there were fantastic ways to deal with that, considering where I was in my life. But I remember that a friend of mine said, in context of this particular boss, he said, "So-and-so is a frightened little girl." And it really was a very, very accurate assessment of what was going on. Most people will lash out like that because there's hurt inside and there's fear inside. And unfortunately, this is kind of what can drive humans. We can either be fear-based or we can be kind of love and compassionate-based. And it's easier to manage out of fear than it is to build trust with employees, which actually is what will generate a better result if you're actually working towards business goals. What can happen to an employee if they feel like they're in this very fear-based environment is that instead of they're working on organizational goals, the things that they were supposedly hired for, they may end up being focused on pleasing the manager, which can be extremely draining, and it's kind of at cross purpose, and it's unfortunate, right? So here are some signs that you could be in a fear-based environment. And it's not necessarily fear-based all the time. Sometimes something will trip up someone. It could even be you in an environment and kind of lead you into fear-based thinking. So an obvious one is when the boss is a micromanager, right? So they have a big fear of losing control. And so they're managing every last thing you do. Lack of empowerment. They almost blame you for not taking ownership of anything, but it's like, are they even giving you the opportunity to take ownership? Another thing that can come up is if someone is preceding a statement by, "I'm just being honest," and then they say something really critical or, just harsh, that is usually not a really good sign of an open, trust-based environment. Sometimes a negative reaction to new ideas or insights. So harsh value judgments on something that's being presented the first time. I hear this a lot in my particular work environment. It's kind of like putting something down almost before it's fully considered. That's another indication of a fear-based environment. And then it can show up in the employees. Like if they're feeling this way, there can be this passive resistance. They could have a paycheck mentality towards work if they're feeling like someone above them is micromanaging or very fear-based. They end up withdrawn from their work, not emotionally engaged. And sometimes it can come out through anger, militance, sabotage, rebellion in some sense. I mean, some work environments are like this. The whole team is like talking about the boss all the time. These are not necessarily great work environments. So here are some ideas, some antidotes if you're in this situation, whether you're the employee or the boss, just to kind of be aware. Think about behaviors that evoke trust in you. Like, what makes you really trust someone? Or what has made you felt really respected by someone? I think the best boss I ever had was in a restaurant when I was 23. And what he brought out in people and just the way that he looked at you and treated you with respect and treated you like an adult really brought out the best of the people in that environment. So if you even made a list of those things, you know, if you thought of your best boss or your best working relationship, and then how can you actually convey that in your environment? Even if you're dealing with people that aren't necessarily working on the same things, that could be helpful. So what are the ways that you've been treated that really say, oh my gosh, I'm respected, I'm valued in this environment, and how can you do your best to bring that out in others, even if it's really, really difficult? Most everyone has some value that they're bringing to an organization. So how can you kind of, I don't want to say stroke them, but really kind of treat them with those capacities with the utmost respect? So the second thing in terms of an anecdote, if someone does have a harsh reaction like I was describing before, kind of like a critical judgment before they've even given something any thought, you could step back, and there's a couple of things I've heard on this. I heard one author say, while that may sound truthful to you, it's not necessarily what I'm feeling is the truth. Now, I don't feel as comfortable saying that in a work environment. I might say that in a one-on-one personal relationship. Another one that I think is useful for a work environment is you could say, that's an interesting perspective. You know, if someone just kind of harshly makes a statement about something, you know, or you could say, you have an interesting perspective. A friend of mine gave me that. So you could even combine the two. You could first say, that's an interesting perspective. And then, you have an interesting perspective, just to kind of separate. Even if they're not recognizing what you're doing, you are acknowledging that you don't buy into whatever that statement was, whatever it was. However, you can lead to a better conversation, more fruitful conversation as to maybe making someone more open to that new insight. And another one, you know, I read in one book about a gentleman who started treating his employees like adults. Go figure. You know, he said people tend to start treating their employees as babies when they come into the office. They clock in, they have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. I mean, again, this isn't necessarily in our modern workplaces, but there's some amount of this that does go on, that we're kind of not treated as adults. And he said, you know, I started treating them as adults, and wow, everything changed. So, you know, people rise or fall to the level of expectation. But what I would say is, don't worry about the boss in this situation. Just treat yourself like an adult, behave like an adult. And sometimes that can be hard when you're not being treated like one at all times. But, you know, you're just going in, you're being a responsible and professional adult in the workplace. And eventually it'll come back to you, or you'll get better opportunities, or something will click and you might move on if you're in a very negative, demoralizing environment. So there are some ideas for how to kind of cultivate the best parts of yourself to maybe even bring out some best parts of other people in these environments that are awfully fear-based. There is a great quote from a song in The Beauty and the Beast where they're going to kill the beast and they say, you know, people don't like what they don't understand. In fact, it scares them. And I think that we're in an environment in society and in corporations where people are often in this fear-based reactionary state, lack of openness to new ideas, and lack of understanding towards things they don't understand. And it's unfortunate, and I think that, you know, we can maintain our own and hope to open up ourselves and others to new ideas. So I hope everyone is having a great week. Again, if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, I'd love it if you would like the video so other people would see it, or subscribe in YouTube. And I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.